we will do 3 key things in this masterclass on batch processing with the Gemini API, which is an essential skill for any AI engineer right now. Number 1, we use the regular API call to analyze the sentiment of a product review, to set up the model and the prompt. Number 2, we use batch processing with an inline batch, which is a simple one, small one to begin with. We will format the batch, we will submit, we will wait, and we will analyze the result. Number 3, the big one, is we will submit a full dataset as a batch. Again, we will first understand the JSONL format and prepare a JSONL file. We will submit, we will wait. When it is successful, we will download the file and analyze the result fully. Now, this is going to be a fairly advanced demo, so pay attention and let's get started. So let's head over to Google Colab for this. And the file we'll use is a small CSV file, which you can find in the link in the description on GitHub. Now, why bother with the batch API? Because the regular API is synchronous. So you send the request, you wait for the response, you get back a single response, and this is fine for very little calls. And we'll see that in action to begin with, right? The batch API is different. The batch API, in that you submit all the requests at once, Gemini processes them in the background asynchronously, and you come back to get the result when it is ready. And this is cheaper by 50% than the regular API. There is no rate limit pressure, so that you have to worry about rate limiting and thresholds and so on. Gemini handles the pacing itself. And this is perfect for larger, non-urgent tasks like this one. And in fact, in bigger companies, when you have lots of data, of course, 50% savings can be a lot of money. So let's do that. Let's connect to the runtime. Let's also upload the file, products.csv, just drag and drop it here in the runtime. You get this warning, you can ignore this. And once it's in, let's start processing. So we'll import the necessary libraries. In this case, we need the library time. We will need the Gen AI module from Google, because that's what we will use. So let me increase the font size. And now it will be from Google import Gen AI. This is their parallel of the OpenAI API. Yes, so this is very handy. And later, for processing the results, we will use pandas. So let me also import pandas as PD. And this is enough, I suppose. Other than this, for the general environment variables and API keys and everything, let's import OS. Let's all put this all in a single import OS. Then we will have your API key not as a variable, but as a secret. And I will show that in a moment. But we need to have this as a secret. So from Google Colab, import user data. So far, this is all good. Let's just put this in a single line, maybe OS and time in a single line. And after doing all of this, what you'll need to do is also put the Gemini API key into an environment variable. What do I mean by that? You see the secrets section over here on the left. This is where you'll put your keys. So what I've done is I've created a new key. I've given a name to this key, and I've put the value of the API key over here, the API key essentially over here, right? And this is now like a secret which is available inside the notebook. So I don't have to write explicitly in the code anywhere. It's an environment variable really, right? So this is the code which will be used to access that particular file. This helps to not expose the API key in the code, right? So let's do this, os.environ, yeah. Then in this environment variable, which variable was Gemini _ API _ key, it should be the user data, which you will get from Google Colab, user data.get, and you should give the name of the variable again. The name of the variable is Gemini API key. So I can just copy it from there and give it an over here. This is the basic setup. And with this setup, you should be able to run the Gemini API from here very easily without any issues. After this is done, let's now load the file essentially. So we can call it, say, reviews df or something like that. Maybe just df to begin with. And we say pandas.read CSV. Name of the file again was product_reviews.csv. And you can just take a look as well to the first few records. And it's a straightforward data set where you have this R001 And you have some reviews like absolutely love this product, works perfectly, terrible quality, broke after 2 days, and so on and so forth. So you have a few reviews. Let's see how many you have. And you have shape. You have 10 reviews. It's a small data set, but you can easily use this for large data sets as well, right? So once you have this, let's now take one single review, maybe say review one or one review, right? Review one or something like that, and just extract one of the reviews. So the top review, let's say df.review and 0. Let's take the first review and print it out. Absolutely love this product, works perfectly and arrived fast. The first thing we will do is use a single API call and classify this particular review. So, and we also perform the setup in this way, the model, the prompt, and so on. So let's say classify single review and setup. Yeah. This way, we can use the setup again for the later parts as well. So the review is with us, review one. Then the client, we have to instantiate of the client, initiate the client, genai.client, and we have to supply the model ID. So model ID, you could use any other model, but I think Gemini dot dash 2.5 dash flash is sufficient. If you'd like, you could use 3 Pro or 3.1 flash or whatever is available. But I think for this purpose, 2.5 flash is enough. Yes, so this is done. The model is also set up. Now you have to specify the system prompt. Of course, you don't necessarily have to have a separate system prompt for this because we're just sending us, we could put it in a single message also, which is also fine, but just generally system prompt separately and the user message separately is a good idea, but let's just do a system prompt right now. And what I'm going to do is a very simple prompt. You say, okay, what do you say? You are a sentiment analyzer. Classify the following review as positive, negative, or neutral, right? And it's up to us. You want 2 classes, 3 classes, up to you. Let's give us 3. Only output the label. Yes, that's it. Only output the label. And let's just make it in a single line. Otherwise, it just gives a lot of \n. So let's do this. So this is a system prompt. You can print it out here just to confirm. Yep, you're a sentiment analyzer. This works. Now, after doing so, you have the system prompt and you'll also need the review, and you can supply this in a single message also, like I said, for simplicity, you can supply it in a single message. So let's just have a combined prompt, which will be the system prompt. Okay. System prompt. Oops, something happened. Okay, let's say system_prompt. Plus, instead of doing a plus, you could also use an F string, which will perhaps be a bit easier. So let's say F, and with the F string, you will have this, okay? You will first put in the first variable. So in the F string, you'll put variables directly. So you can say system_prompt. And after this, maybe you give a line or a couple of lines, and then you give the review, okay? So \n, maybe a couple of lines, 1 line, whatever, or some separator, which makes it very clear this is a review, okay? Review. And from this point, you can have the review now. So review, and you give a space, and then this is the other variable. So you can say review 1. The review 1 was a variable. So let's just check it out if it came fine or not. And yes, indeed, yeah, you are a sentiment analyzer. Classify the following review as positive, negative, neutral. Only output the label. Review is this. Absolutely love this product. Works perfectly. And this also works as expected. Perfect. Now, we have the combined prompt, and we also have the model client specified. The first part is fairly straightforward. You simply send this, right, and you generate the response using the client's generate content method. So let's just do that. Let me give a generic standard response as the name. So response is client.models.generate content. And then here, this is the standard one. You specify the model equals to model_ID. Then the contents which you're supplying, this is the content you're giving to the model, right now is the combined_prompt. Note that you could have also had a system prompt separately, which goes as a config in the content. So this is separate. But anyway, we are simplifying this code for the purpose of demonstration. but in general, I would recommend that you, especially if you have different kinds of system prompts being given, and maybe separate the system as a config item and then the user message separately, right? But let's continue. This is setup, and this is it. I mean, when I send this, it will get the response. Okay, so let me just do this, and the response is here. The response will be, I mean, if I see the response object, it will be like this. I want, within this response object, I just want the text really. So, I mean, I don't need all of this. I can just say response.text, and it is positive, right? That's the shorthand way of getting to it. So response.text is positive. Fine, this seems to work. And we have successfully analyzed one review's sentiment using the API. We have the prompt setup, and we also have the model setup using Gemini 2.5 Flash. Well done. Let's move on to the next one, where we do an inline batch processing. Let's now start batch processing with a small inline batch. Now, there are two different ways of sending batches to Google Gemini, and you can refer to the official Gemini batch API documentation for this. Looks like we found the right time to do this. There's an incident going on. The batch API might randomly fail, but that's not a problem. Hopefully, by the time you do this, it's all fixed. The batch API is designed to process large volumes of data at 50% cost. Now, there are two ways to submit your request in batch API. Number one is the inline, which is what you'll do first. You directly add the objects to your request, and this is suitable for smaller batches, which is under 20 MB, and the output is a list of inline responses. The other is a full file, which we will see in the next part of the video. But let's look at the inline request part, and you can see the format over here, the kind of format the inline this API really expects for an inline request. And what it really needs is a very specific format. It needs data in this way, right? It needs inline request. It is a list of dictionaries where each is a generate content request, and the request has these things. It has the contents, which is essentially overall each request is there's a list, and there is a request in each row, and each row there are the contents, and within the contents you have the parts, and within the parts there is a text, which is the actual prompt that you need to give, and the role is that of the user. And if you'd like to provide a system prompt as well, again, you have to come here, you have to provide a different kind of a role here. You have to have a config element over here, and if you want to even change things like a temperature and everything, then you have to come here and change the config. But anyway, let's keep it simple for now. You can explore the API, all details are over here, but for now you just go with the parts. In fact, if you look at this, the role also is not really needed if you're sending a single message in a request. So if you only have the full text, like the combined prompt we had, we don't even need the role. So we'll keep it very simple. We'll only use the parts, right? So let's go back to the code and let's start formatting, because formatting is the main thing we need to do. So let's format first one review, and let's format then the entire mini batch, which will be, let's just take 3 to 4 records, right? So the review one that we had was this. Absolutely love this product. And if you remember, the system prompt was so URL sentiment analyzer, classify for positive, negative, and neutral. Now we need the required format, which needs to have parts essentially, right? And I mean, you could skip the user like I mentioned. So what we'll do is we'll create this first for one record. So let's just say start a new empty dictionary, okay? And in this dictionary, we will add the data. So just call it row dict, so it is easy for us to work with later. Remember the combined prompt. We can create our own combined prompt for this particular review. So combined prompt, we'll again do the F string, which is I think a bit better. So system_prompt, and then system prompt, and then you remember you gave \n, 2 lines. Sorry, this way, \n, and then you had review and this, and space, and then you had the actual review. So in this case, review 1, we will replace this with the variable. So this would be the combined prompt, and this should be added as the parts of the text. So if you remember, go back here, we have to create this kind of a structure. Row dict should be in this format, right? So row dict contents, the contents is what you need. So you should have contents within this dictionary, and you should have parts, and within the parts you should have text. So let's just create this. Now row underscore dict, as I mentioned, we need contents section, and within the contents, as I mentioned, you need to have, it's a dictionary, and within this you need to have parts, and within the parts, because there could be many things actually in the parts, so it's typically a list, and within that you could have text. So this is the standard way of doing this, and I'm writing it this way. I'll simplify it later, but combine underscore prompt. So when I do it this way, you can, it's much more readable for you as well, right? What is happening here? So the row dict has one key, which is the contents. Within the contents, there is parts, which is actually a list. And within the list, the thing you have is text, right? Which is the combined prompt. And if you just run this, you can see what row dict is. So if you print row dict, this is what you get. So contents, parts, and text, which is the full prompt, right? Which includes the review as well. So this is how it works. Now, if you'd like, you can simplify this. You can put it into a single line if you like that. If it is less, some people prefer this, some people like it the earlier way. But regardless, you could just do whatever you want, right? So you can keep it this way. I prefer it this way. It's just easy for me to read. So this is the row dict, and you could do this for one. And now you need to be able to do this for all of the other as well, all of the other reviews as well. So what we'll do is we'll make a function out of this. Okay, so making a function to apply to all the reviews in the mini batch or tiny batch. Let's call it tiny batch with 3 or 4 of them. All right. So let's make a function, and we can call it whatever. So we can call it def. You can say format underscore review, and just name it review for now. And first thing, as we did earlier, we could just copy this entire thing from here and put it down here like so, and then do the indentation and so on. So first, maybe we could just put the combined prompt on top, so it's easier. Remember, review 1, it should be review, right? So this is done. Row dict is dict, which is empty to begin with. Then you have this section, and I think this is it. After doing so, you can simply return row underscore dict, right? So exactly what we had earlier, it is now just a part of a function, right? And let's just see if this works. This is fine. Let's try it out perhaps. So format underscore review, and you can say review 1. Let's see what it gives. Yeah, it seems to be working. We can also check it out with a different review, df review, say 2. And yeah, it seems to be working. It does what it says, nothing special. So this seems to be working. Now, this seems to be working. The function is fine. Now we need to do this for the small batch. So let's first create the tiny batch. So the tiny batch really is, let's just call it tiny batch underscore raw. And just say creating a tiny batch. Tiny batch underscore raw is, let's take say 4 reviews, first 4 reviews. Yeah. So df review 0 to 4 or 4 reviews. Now this is it. Tiny batch is 4 of these. That's it. Okay. Now let's add them to the list that we want in the inline request. So inline underscore request, as I mentioned earlier, it is a list of requests, of course. So you start with an empty list, and we'll simply just iterate over the tiny batch and just add it, right? So for review or rev in tiny underscore batch underscore raw, we want to have inline underscore requests. Let's just requests dot append. What do we have? Of course, format underscore review and the name of the variable, rev or review or whatever you want, right? Review in format review. And this is run. It seems to be working fine. Let's just take a look just to make sure this is not wrong. Inline request, take a look at the first 2, and it seems to be fine. That there's overall request. Each of them is a dict, contents, and within contents you have parts. There's a list, and within the list there is a text, and then there is a prompt. So it seems to have done its job correctly, and I think we are ready with the batch. So you can pause at this moment and just make sure you got the batch in the exact format that we have. A small note over here, which something worth noticing is that I've been a bit relaxed with the API. So in general, the Gemini API expects this also to be part of a list. So ideally, I should have had this too in a list like so, okay? Because it expects a list. But it is lenient, the API is lenient over here. So even if I don't give a list, if I give a single element here, single request, it kind of understands, right? It adds the list accordingly. So, but yeah, of course, the better way would be to make sure this is actually a list, right? So please go ahead and do that. I just forgot, but it's all good. Yeah, the API will handle this. API is generous. So this is done. Let's now submit the batch and create the job. So submit the batch and create the job. And here it's something inline underscore job. We can call it whatever, inline underscore job. The function you will use is client.batches, right? So earlier you had client.model. If you remember, client.models.generate content. And now you have client.batches.create. And again, model equals model underscore ID. And now source or SRC equals inline underscore requests. Let's see if I missed anything. Create. Yeah, this seems to be fine. And the moment I do this, I will get a batch name as well. So let's just run this. And this will do the job. So let me print the inline underscore job. It is done. And let me just fetch some properties, right? It has a few things: completion stats, creation time, display name, and so on and so forth, multiple things. So end time when it is done and so on. So we'll also look at the completion status, by the way, continuously. But anyway, let's look at the name of this. And this is the name that our batch has received. Now, like this, perhaps you would have submitted multiple batches, and it's very important that you can take the batch name and find out what the status is for that particular batch. So right now the batch is submitted, and now it's a waiting game. So you have to look and wait for the batch. So what we need to do is, using the batch name, get the batch info. So let me just do it this way. Job underscore info is a client.batches. So you have done this batch submission, and there's a separate function to get the info for any particular batch you want, right? So client.batches.get. And here you provide the name. You could provide the actual name like so, like just take this and provide this name, or in this case, we have it in this variable, right? So we just use it this way. So job info, and job info.state should give you what the status is. So right now it is in a pending state, right? So the batch has been submitted. It is in a pending state. At this point, we don't even know if the request that we gave has some error, it will be processed or not, right? So we really need to wait for the status to go into running. And at this point, really what has happened is we have sent it. Now, Google may decide to take it up right now, maybe decided to take it up after an hour, maybe 2 hours. It can take up to a day apparently, but generally I've noticed it happen in a few minutes, especially for these small batches. Sometimes minutes, sometimes maybe, but in general it is less than an hour or 2 hours, right? So this is the job state which we continuously need to monitor. Now, in this case, we will do this manually. So we can essentially have a small loop for this, and the small loop can really just keep checking the status and maybe check every 10 seconds what the status is perhaps, and just stop. But in general, there are better ways to do this, right? Companies have their own middle layer, which does this. There's things like a back off and exponential, and there's many things where there's a lot more science. If you're doing it on a managed system like Google Cloud and so on, there are very easy modules you can just plug in and you can just check again and again, right? So you can have 10-second wait or a 30-second wait or whatever. I will just show you how this is done, and then we don't really need to wait for the entire thing. I could really show you a different batch from earlier. So you see first, right, at this point, the job state is pending. And the system will wait for 10 seconds. And then after 10 seconds, the system will again come back and check again. And now you see the job status is running. and running. Because it's in the batch mode, it might take a bit more time, we don't know, and so on. But we don't need to wait for this entire thing. We can pause here. I've already done this before, and either let's just wait till this over and I'll come back once this is done, or if it takes too long, I will just show you the result from the previous execution. So I've stopped the previous batch because it will take too much time. I have another batch which you can perhaps take a look at, and let me just use that batch instead. What I'm going to do is, instead of taking that previous batch name, I will do this batch which I completed just some time back, and this is the name of the batch. Once you've done yours, you could also get a name like this, right? So I'm using another batch from earlier, and same thing. If you do this batches.get, and if you see the state, this should be succeeded, right? So this is a successful batch. Now, once that batch is successful, as will your batch also be, what can we do? We need to get the data for this. And once this is done, really, this job info is done, you'll see actually it's a very big object, really, a lot of things over here. But the one you care about really is inline responses, okay? So let me just get rid of this. If you just do, there is destination, there's dest, batch job dest, and within batch job dest, there you see there are inline responses. There's many things over here, but we are concerned about inline responses, okay? And if you see this again, there's a lot of detail over here. We will actually just extract the things that we want. So we need to do a little bit of extraction in this case. Now, with the inline responses, let's take the first one. Let's just take the one of them, okay? And you see that there is details. This is too unclean, but let's just get the first one of them. If I get this, the first one, now within this, you'll see that there is this response, of course. So let's just do response, right? And get this, and within the response, you have this text, right? So what you need to do is response.text, and you see it's positive. So job info, dest, inline responses, 0, response, text. This is quite nested, so you have to do this kind of a extraction, right? For each of the, say, values in the responses. Now, there's a few ways you can do this. Of course, you can have a function which iterates over this. That is one way of doing this, or you can, just put it into, I would like to see in a data frame the original value and the original, say, review text and the sentiment. Now I'm just going to make it simple for me, and I like doing things in data frames. So sentiment df is pd dot, of course, but you're free to create a list out of it first and so on. I'm just taking a shortcut here, or a convenient cut here. Pd dot data frame, and you can say a raw underscore object. Raw object would be it just has to be a dictionary. So raw object would be the job info dot dest dot inline responses, which is essentially a list. Inline responses, which is a list. Now, I could have extracted this first and then, but this is fine for now. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add sentiment underscore df. In this, I will add original review, and this should be what? This should be tiny underscore batch raw. And the second column, sentiment underscore df, second column, which should be the, say, sentiment, right? Which should be sentiment underscore df dot, I'm not dot, but maybe just look at this raw underscore object. Let's use this way, this is better. Now you have to apply the function, and you could either put a lambda function over here, lambda obj maybe, or lambda response maybe, or response dot. What do you need to do? Dot, yeah. Or let's just make it a different. Let's call it object because it is confusing. So obj, because it's response inside. So obj dot response dot text. Okay, and just to make sure the text, there's no spaces and everything, text dot strip. Now what this should do is this should make sure it is extracted into the sentiment, and right, and that's what it should be. As we did over here, same thing being done over here. Response dot text dot strip as an addition to make sure the leading spaces are gone. So let's get this done, and let's just see sentiment underscore df. All right, so we have something. Absolutely love this product, works perfectly, sentiment is positive, terrible quality, negative, and so on. Of course, if you want, you could also do a drop, and you can say drop of raw object and so on, and whatever, up to you. But yes, this is what it is like, right? So this seems to work. You have the data now, you have the original as well as the sentiment finally. So you have successfully now done batch processing with an inline batch. You formatted it with the required, say, formatting which was needed. You sent it, you waited for the batch to be completely done. And then once you got the result, you understood the format and you extracted the data, right? So well done. This was about inline responses, inline batch. And then in the next section, we'll look at a full file and how to submit a full file, a JSON file, JSONL file as a batch. So let's now send a full file for batch processing. This is the full deal. Now, in this case, we will now need to use the JSONL file. And the JSONL file is actually a simple format. Each line is one complete JSON object. That's what we will do. Lines are separated by new lines. It is easy to read, write, and stream line by line. So this is one of the things we will need right now. But before doing that, let's just take a look at the the API again. So the input file is a JSON lines, JSONL. Each line contains a complete generate content request. Okay, the object is very similar to what we did earlier. The only thing which is new, we'll see in a moment, is the key. The output returned is also a JSONL file, where each line is either a generate content response or a status object, right? So let's go and look at the input file method. And you see here, each line in the file must be a JSON object, yes, containing a user-defined key. Now, why is this? Because when the response comes back to us, it is not necessarily in the same order in which we sent it. So we must have a key to map it back. In general, the key should be a text key, but it is, again, the API is lenient. You could give it a number, it will still take it, but just generally take a text, right? The file can be up to 2 gigabytes. So you see, right, it takes much more data now, right? Even 2 gigabytes, you could send a lot of reviews, right? So tens of thousands of reviews and so on. If not, you can have multiple batches or multiple files. So this is actually the better way to, of course, the only logical way for larger data sets. Now, the following is an example of the kind of format you need. So you need to have a key, wherein you have the key. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4 as well. As long as it is unique, it's fine. You should be able to match it back to the data. And then there is a request. Now, within the request, there is a content parts, and this is exactly the same as before what we had done. So when we create this, we'll see we could just simply reuse the function we had before. Okay, and after doing so, you can put it into a JSONL file and upload it as using the files.upload method. So let's see it in detail. Don't get overwhelmed. First, step by step, right? First, the JSONL. So we will have to add the key parameter, which is new. The reason, as I mentioned, that they don't come back in the same order that we want earlier. So first thing, we need to have the JSONL format. So let's create a function to do this. So def format underscore review, let's say, and this time we call it JSONL for simplicity. And remember, what we need this time is two things, not just the review, but we also need the key or the index. So ind and review. So we take the index and the review, and we'll make sure both of them are there. Okay. So this time the row underscore dictionary. Let's start with the blank dict. This is still fine. Now, the first thing you need to add is the key. So row underscore dict and add a key. Okay. And as I mentioned, it is better to have it as a string, even if it's a number. API is lenient, it might accept it, but just keep it string. Second is row dict, and here you need to have the request. And what you could do is use the format underscore review function from earlier. If you go back up, what did you have in format underscore request? This, right? Format underscore review was this, where I'll just bring it down here again for ease. Look at it in a single view. So what did we have here, right? We had this. We first added a system prompt. We had another dictionary, which is part of it, right? And then we had this contents, and within the contents we had parts, within that we had text, which we had combined prompt. This was the previous one. We don't recreate this, we will just reuse this function, right? And as we saw, this entire thing goes as a request. So we could do something as simple as this: format review and call it review. So format review of review, the entire thing comes in. In addition, there is a key, and that's it. And we say return row underscore ticked, or request, or whatever you call it, right? You can whatever you want. So done, and let's test it out. Let's just make sure this works fine or not. Okay, so the data frame, if you take two of them, this is what we had, and let's take one of them. Okay, let's just take one of them. So format review JSONL, and if I take the index as 1, I can give whatever index I want, and I could say df.review, and I supply 1 over here. You see, this is what I get. Key is 1, which is a string. Then there is request. Now within request there is content, there is parts, and within parts there is text. Okay, and this is really what you want. Within requests there is key, the key, there is request, and then this actual request, and there is contents, and there is parts, and there is text. Okay, so this follows that, right? And the only difference here, you will see that within contents, as I mentioned earlier, it can be a list. That is the ideal way, but you can update your function to have a list, but this is also fine for now. The API will accept it. Now this is for one particular row, right? So all of this, you need to create a list of these and put it into a file. So this function works, the formatting is fine. Let's just apply this for all the different rows in the data frame. And how do you do that? To iterate over the data frame, I mean, if you folks are not aware, if I let's just take the first 2 records, okay, df2 records. If I do an iter tuples, so df.iter tuples, which will take like all the values in the data, right? So you can have index, and then you can skip this, and then so each of the column essentially comes in, right? So for ind comma this underscore comma review in df.iter tuples, so you are skipping the review ID over here. Basically, you could just say, it's just for simplicity, just to show you, right? You can say print review and ind comma review. You can see the index and review are both coming in. So now you have them accessible within the loop, right? So what do? You need to iterate over this, and maybe just print it out for now. So format underscore review underscore JSONL, and you say ind underscore review, right? Just to make sure this thing works. And the indentation is, format review, JSONL underscore JSONL. Yeah, this is working fine. This is good. And we can essentially use this to create the JSONL file. So let's just do that. Let's just create the JSONL file, and let's just say import JSON, and we say JSONL underscore file underscore name, file name. Let's just call it full underscore batch dot JSONL. Remember, this can be up to 2 gigabytes, so it doesn't have to be this small. Okay, and let's just dump it into the file. JSONL underscore file name. Okay, I haven't run this file name. To write mode as file. Okay, now you can copy this from above. So let's just paste it and indent it. Okay, instead of a print, we will do request underscore line as this thing. Okay, and just write this to the file. So file dot write, and just make sure it is in JSON. So JSON dot dump string request line. This is request line. Okay, let me just make it line. Request line, single line, and remember that it has to be separated by new line. So \n. So this should be fine. Let's just make sure it works. You run this, and let's see, in this you have the JSONL file come up. Let's just open it to see if it indeed worked. Close this, and here if I see key 1 request, it does seem to work. So JSON, it seems to be working, text and so on and so forth. So this is good, all good. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and run this for the entire data set because we are confident it works. So get rid of this indexing here. This is the full file and run. And just to confirm, I click on this, and yes, there are indeed 10 of them, and this seems to have worked fine. So the JSONL file is ready. Step number 1 is done. Let me just write it over here then. Right, step number 1 is creating the JSONL, and after you're done this, now this file needs to be uploaded to Gemini. So let's go ahead and create this. So step 2, and make it this level, upload file to the Gemini file API. And here again, this API is very straightforward really, actually, client.files.upload. And here you need to specify a few things. So file equals to, so JSONL underscore file name. This is the file name you have. And then in the config, you have to set up a display name. So config, you'll have a few things over here. One, you can say display name, which would be, call it whatever, right? Sentiment batch file, or up to you, right? Here, make sure you specify that this is a JSONL file. So MIME type is application/JSONL. I mean, maybe it's not needed, but just to make sure, it typically identifies the JSON itself. But anyway, this is safer. So this is done. The config is specified, and this will return the uploaded file reference. So let me just call it uploaded file equals this, and run. Okay. Again, this is essentially uploading the file now, right? The batch is still not done, but we just uploaded the file, and you can print it out as well. Uploaded file, you can just say .name, and this is the name. This is the name of the file you have, right? Now, you will supply this file, of course, as a source when you are creating this new batch. So the only difference from the last time you had an inline source. This time you have a file source, and everything else is the same. So step 3, create the batch, maybe create and submit the batch and wait. Let's see. So file underscore batch underscore job is exactly like before, client.batches .create. And like I said, like before, everything is the same. The only thing, the difference is the source is an uploaded file. So model is model underscore ID. Then src is uploaded underscore file dot name. You can call it something better if you'd like. Config, I would say display name. And this job is you can call it whatever you want. So, but yeah, let's say sentiment analysis job. Okay. So display name, this is it. And once this is done, of course, as earlier, you will also have a name for this batch job. Yes. So you can also print this. So print batch.name. This is a name you will use to fetch information about this. And like earlier, we will be able to get the info of this job. So job underscore info equals client.batches.get, as exactly like we did earlier, .get, and name will be file underscore batch underscore job dot name. And then the first thing you could do is job info.state, and you can see where it's state, and you see this is pending. So successful submission, and now you're waiting. So let's just see what we did again. Step number 1, formatted into JSONL. It was very similar like earlier. It just had one more level of nesting, and it additionally needed a key to be created, right? So we created this key. Let me get rid of this now. This is the new code. And then after making the JSON file, we uploaded to the Gemini file API. Then we created the batch. The only thing we did differently from earlier is we said the source is actually a file, and that's it. We submitted, and now we wait. So let's wait for this to be done, and then we'll see how to process the result. Okay, so assuming the job is completed and succeeded, let's now fetch the result and analyze. So I'm using an older job. So instead of getting this existing job, I'm getting an older job, which I'm sure has completed, and the state is succeeded. And what I'm going to do now, this is actually a file batch job, right? So I'm going to get this now. I'm going to download the file. So as we saw earlier, this will return a JSONL file. So we should be able to download the JSONL file and be able to analyze it. So let's do the same. So job info, if you just take a look at this now, you see this was the sentiment analysis job that we did, and this is the model and so on. Status succeeded. Perfect. Now this batch job destination file name. So let's just get the file essentially at this point. So download the files, and we have dest file name, we just saw. So let me just get that. So the result actually will be in bytes. So it will be JSONL, but in bytes, of course. So I'll say client.files, the API, and I'll say download. And the file to download is actually the job info.dest.file_name. So this is the result bytes. So the bytes is so. Now, there are a few ways you can read from these bytes. Of course, you can first save it into a file, or you can have a JSON load string and so on, and you can read from a file. But I think an easier or more convenient way for myself is really just get it straight away into a pandas data frame like before and just extract it from there. So let's just do that. Let's say import IO, so that pandas takes it like something like a local file of sorts in a way. So let's say pd.read_JSON, and I will supply the IO bytes. So anyway, so let's call it result df. PD is read.json, and here I will say io.bytes io, and result_bytes. And because it has lines, so JSONL, so I say lines equals to true. This should have a single column here inside, and you can take a look at the head. So the full response, it will be really long. So, but we'll see how to extract from each of them. So let's just make this smaller here. And now we need to be able to extract. Let's take one row. So let's just see, this is response here, right? So let's just say response. And also you notice that you have a key over here, which is essential because you need to be able to match it to the original, right? So anyway, response result df, and there you have response, and you take response, the first one, 0. In this, as you can see, you have to get to here. So you have the candidates, and then within the candidates, you have this is a list here, and there is content, and within content, you have the parts, and within parts, which is again a list, you have to have the text, all right? I don't think here you have directly the text like you had earlier. Yeah, it doesn't work like this from like you had earlier, maybe. Doesn't work. So unfortunately, you have to do the full nesting in this case, okay? So let's just do it anyway. So first thing is, this is, you have to go to candidate, you have to go to content. No, this is within candidates. So you have to go to candidates. As I said, candidates. And then within candidates, you have which is a list in this case, as you saw. And let's just run this. Yeah, so you're there. Now within this, there is content. So go to content. And then within content is actually you have parts. And parts is a list here. So you have to take the first element, which is 0. And then within this, there is text. All right, so let's just see if this works. Yes, it does work. So, I mean, this is so much. So let's just do this. Let's just make a simple function which extracts this, right? So let's say def extract sentiment, and we can just give it a response, yeah, resp. And what this will do is simply take this kind of a response object, right, and then just give us back the result. So it could be as simple as this: return, let's say resp dot this entire thing, or let's say resp this entire thing, right? This should work. We can test it out. So simple function which just does this extraction for us. Let's just run this. Seems to have worked. Let's actually run it on a particular column. So result df and dot response, and take the first one, maybe the second one this time. Yeah, it's negative, and this. So you are able to extract it properly. this works. So now let's just simply apply this on the entire data frame. So we have this result df and result df dot sentiment. The new column here is result underscore df dot, or you can just say response dot apply and extract sentiment, right? So right, this should work. Let's just take a look. And if you run this, say result df dot head, maybe 3 records, and indeed you have the key and the sentiment. And of course, as we discussed earlier, you can merge this with the original data frame with the actual text on the key variable, and this should be it, right? So, and let's just finish this and let's look at all the responses. Indeed, we got all of them or not, because it may so happen that some of them there is no response, right? Because there was a failure or something. But in this case, we seem to have all responses. So this is done. So this has indeed worked, right? And we successfully uploaded. Essentially, we successfully had a batch file created for the entire file. This could be as big as 2 gigabytes, and then we created a JSONL. We submitted the file. We started the job. We waited, and we also saw how to fetch and analyze the result. And as we saw, the key, and we have to extract this, and with the key and the sentiment, we can match this back to the original data that we had. So it's all together. All right, great job, guys. You did really well. We did quite a few in this masterclass. So a lot of things done. And this, what you did here, is an essential skill for modern AI engineers, because you typically will generally have a lot of batch processing done in big companies. If you work with, say, thousands of data, you won't be sending one by one. It doesn't make any sense. So I hope this helps. And if you'd like more such informative deep dives and masterclasses, subscribe to this channel and like it and share with your friends so that everyone benefits. See you in the next video.